I like failures. I think ships that failed for one reason or another have a certain charm to them. It seems as though fate was against them, or perhaps they were built under a misconception, or maybe were built for the right reasons and entered at the wrong time. But either way, there are ships out there that luck was just not with them, or circumstances just did not favor them. And today we're going to look at one such vessel. Today we're going to check out the life and career of Burdigala, or perhaps better known by its previous name as the Kaiser Friedreich. This ship was built in 1898 by Ferdinand Werft, and was designed to be the follow-up ship for NDL's fantastic Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse. You might know that ship. It was the first German four-funneled ocean liner entering service in 1897, broke speed records, shook British perceptions of their maritime dominance to the core, and started a fashion trend where all large ocean liners had to have four funnels. Riding on the wave of this success, NDL decided that we needed a new ship to follow up. And so they employed the shipyard to construct another magnificent ship with a contracted speed that should be at a minimum 21 knots. This ship, as it was being constructed, had a cleaner profile and, quite interestingly, abandoned the now fashionable four-funneled look and went for a more symmetrical three-funneled appearance. Its interior was typical of very late 19th century decor, with this Beaux Arts, eye candy type interior decoration, as you can see by this depiction of its first class salon / dining room. And so this ship was launched, entered service with the grand name of Kaiser Friedreich. The Kaiser that this ship was named after had a very short reign. He was only on the throne for 99 days, and perhaps this could be an omen for what was to come for the ship. For the time, the Kaiser Friedreich was large, and its vital statistics were as follows. The Kaiser Friedreich weighed 12,480 gross tons, was 600 feet long, which equates to about 183 meters, had a beam of 63 feet, which equates to about 19 meters. It had 5-cylinder reciprocating steam engines that would eventually be converted into quadruple expansion engines, which drove twin propellers. And we'll get to the speed in just a second. Entering service with great fanfare, problems were very quickly identified. The engines didn't run well, and the boilers weren't producing as much power as required. And so the ship could not meet the required speeds. It could barely hit 20 knots. And after 8 voyages with NDL, the company, very dissatisfied with this ship that, despite looking fantastic, could not maintain its schedule, they decided to use this clause of not meeting the minimum requirements and gave the ship back to the shipyard, which was almost unheard of at the time. And it caused a very long court case to pan out, which would not be resolved for many years afterwards. The shipyard was so embarrassed by this ship that it wouldn't even appear in their promotional literature for many years afterwards, and even then it would be under its later name. Laid up, the shipyard tried to sell their ship, and another German company, Hapag, were interested. They needed a large ship to help maintain their lead, since NDL was taking most of the publicity and the bookings with their brand new Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse, and Hapag had their own version under construction, the Deutschland, but in the interim they needed a ship, and so they decided, alright, we'll take this ship on. Speed after the Deutschland would stop being a requirement for Hapag, but at this point speed still mattered to a degree. The shipyard would refit the Kaiser Friedreich. The funnels would be slightly extended to try and improve draft. Tweaks were made to the engines and boilers, and the ship went off. And again, it struggled. There was just something about the way the boilers were set up that this ship was just not operating at the minimum required speed. It could barely strike 20 knots. Had this ship been built for other runs or for a route that required a top speed of 18 knots, then this ship would have been perfectly adequate. But for the North Atlantic, it just didn't cut it. And so after 10 voyages, Hapag did the same thing as NDL and gave the ship back to the shipyard and said, "No thank you." And the ship sat there in the shipyard, essentially laid up for 12 years. Come 1912, and there is a new French shipping company that is about to enter service for the South America run, Sud Atlantique, as they would eventually be known. And Sud Atlantique had a very famous ship in the 1930s called the L'Atlantique. The fortunes of this company deserve a documentary all on their own, because so many things went wrong in the life of this company, it almost beggars belief. But that's separate. We're going to stick with the Kaiser Friedreich. Basically, they needed ships very quickly because due to problems with the contract being signed, they needed ships to hurry up and start sailing so they can fulfill the mail contract and get passengers and mail out to South America. And with those going out, they can finally get the government subsidies they needed to get running. So they took on this laid-up three-funneled ship, and quite interestingly, Sud Atlantique would operate three-funneled ships as their flagships for most of their career, their Lutetia, Gallia, Massilia, and then in the 30s their L'Atlantique were all majestic three-funneled vessels. Also, as part of the refurbishment and to make it more suitable for the run, the ship was given a white hull, beautiful gold-colored funnels, and a red rooster icon, which was the city symbol of Bordeaux. The ship was renamed Burdigala, which is the Latin name for the city of Bordeaux. And you can see depictions of the Burdigala in its glorious white livery up there. I wasn't able to replicate the rooster fitting on the funnels, but you do get a sense of the grandeur of the ship. Refitted, new boilers, a new interior, the ship was sent off. And initially, things looked great. It seemed as though the Burdigala had finally found its niche. Bookings were solid. And that all was short-lived, because as the French directors were looking at their profits, and before they could say, ooh la la, they realized that for all the money the ship was generating with its high passenger loads, that revenue was being eaten up by the even higher cost of coal consumption. The ship could just not pay its way. And despite being repainted in the latter half of 1913 to be in line with the rest of the fleet, with a black hull and black-topped funnels with the buff color, as you can see here at docked, ship was again laid up, and instead the company decided to charter older vessels that were still a lot more economical to operate. Who knows what would have been the fate of this ship had World War I not started? But as it was, the conflict began, and with the crushing need for troop ships, even the Burdigala was pressed into service. Now, I couldn't find evidence that the ship was covered in dazzle paint. This is purely my creative interpretation, as opposed to it being in completely drab grey. So there was a bit of artistic license in this reconstruction. The Burdigala's last voyage began on the 13th of November 1916. This ship really couldn't catch a break. Having departed the port of Thessaloniki to return back to Toulon to collect more troops and to continue on with fighting in the Mediterranean. At 10:45 a.m. on the 14th of November, a large explosion was heard and felt between the first and second funnels. The ship began to roll over slightly, and the captain deemed that it was beyond any hope of saving the ship, and so all the crew were evacuated. As they were evacuating, another explosion was heard. Thankfully, nobody lost their lives, and while they got off, the poor Burdigala was put out of its misery and sank. And thus ended the very unfortunate life of this ship. It flopped in any commercial voyage it undertook. It was a failure from the get-go, whether it was through bad calculations with the boilers, or maybe just bad engineering, or potentially bad luck. As I said, had this ship been built and placed on a route that didn't require such high speeds, potentially it would have been perfect for that run. But as it was, this ship just couldn't catch a break, and it took a global conflict to put it out of its misery. I love learning about lesser known vessels and liners, and especially those that just didn't quite make it. I know of 3 failures: the Great Eastern, today's Burdigala, and the Australian Indara. Are there any other ocean liners that you can think of that were a failure, or maybe entered service in the wrong circumstances and had a successful career later on? If yes, please let me know down below. I would love to learn more and hopefully bring their stories to life. Thank you.